Margaret Elaine Calloway had learned, somewhere in her 47 years on this earth, that silence could fill a room more completely than any sound. She had learned it in boardrooms, where the pause after a difficult decision could feel heavier than the decision itself. She had learned it in hallways, where colleagues stepped aside when she walked past. And she had learned it most deeply, most tenderly, in the presence of her son, her boy, Noah. He was 5 years old, and he had not spoken a single word since the age of 2. The doctors called it selective mutism. They used careful, clinical words, and Margaret sat in those offices in her tailored charcoal blazes and her measured composure, taking notes on a small leather pad, nodding at the appropriate moments. She was the CEO of Callaway Meridian Consulting, a firm that managed over $400 million in assets for clients across the eastern seaboard. She was accustomed to receiving hard information and processing it with grace. But those drives home, alone in the back seat of her company car, with the partition closed and the city lights blurring past the window, those were the moments she allowed herself to feel the full weight of it. Noah was not broken. She needed to believe that. She did believe that. He was bright and curious, and he had eyes the color of warm honey, and when he laughed, which he did quietly without sound, his whole face became a kind of miracle. He had her mother's cheekbones and his father's stubborn chin, and when he held her hand in crowded places, he held it with a grip that told her he trusted her completely. His father, Richard, had left when Noah was 3, not dramatically, not with cruelty, just quietly, the way water finds a crack in stone and slowly widens it. He had said he wasn't equipped. He had said it gently, and Margaret had nodded in the way she always nodded when receiving hard information, and then he was gone. So it was the two of them, Margaret and her silent boy. She had hired the best support staff, the finest specialists. She kept an immaculate home in Georgetown, full of good light and warm rugs and bookshelves lined with picture books she read to Noah every night. She wore emerald green on the evenings she allowed herself softness, a color her mother had told her, long ago, meant you were not afraid to be seen. On this particular Saturday in late September, she had taken Noah to Riverside Park. It was her assistant, Patricia, who had suggested it. You need to let him be around other children, Patricia had said, with the gentle firmness of someone who had known her employer for 11 years and understood her blind spots. Not a structured program, not a therapy session, just the park, Margaret, just ordinary life. And so here they were. Margaret sat on a wooden bench near the sandbox, wearing a soft cream blouse and dark slacks, her honey blonde hair loose at her shoulders because it was the weekend. And she was trying, deliberately, to be a woman on a bench and not an executive on assignment. Noah stood a few feet away from the sandbox, watching the other children play with a particular stillness he carried everywhere, observant, alert, present, but separated by some invisible distance that Margaret could not bridge no matter how many specialists she consulted. She had brought a book. She did not open it. She watched her son watch the world. And then, across the sandbox, she noticed them. A man, perhaps 40 or so, with dark hair and an easy, unguarded smile, crouched down beside a small boy of roughly Noah's age. The man was broad-shouldered, casually dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, and there was something in the way he moved, unhurried, attentive, almost ceremonial, that caught her attention before she understood why. The small boy beside him was holding a toy truck and looking at the sand with a furrowed brow. The man watched his son for a moment. Then, without a word, he sat down right there in the sand, in his good jacket. He simply sat down beside his boy and picked up a small plastic shovel and began, quietly, to dig. The boy looked at his father. Then he looked at the sand. Then, very slowly, he sat down too. Margaret watched this. She watched the way the man did not narrate the moment, did not perform enthusiasm, did not say, "Come on, buddy, let's have fun," the way so many well-meaning adults did with children who needed more time. He simply sat. He simply dug. He made himself present and available and utterly without demand. After a few minutes, the boy with the truck began to build something. His father helped without being asked, forming the walls of what appeared to be a road or a tunnel, shaping the sand with his hands while his son directed with small, serious gestures. She realized her hands were folded in her lap, and she had been watching for nearly 10 minutes. She looked to her left. Noah was no longer standing where she had left him. Her heart seized the way every mother's heart seizes in that moment, and she stood quickly, scanning, and then she saw him. He had moved 3 feet closer to the sandbox. He was watching the man and his son with that particular focused stillness, the kind that in Noah meant genuine interest. She sat back down. Slowly, she made herself breathe. The man glanced up then, the way people sometimes do when they feel eyes on them, and he saw Noah standing there at the edge of the sandbox. He looked at Noah for a moment, not with a performance of friendliness, not with the exaggerated cheerfulness that well-meaning strangers sometimes aim to quiet children. He just looked at him, the same way he had looked at his own son before sitting down. Steady, patient, acknowledging. Then he looked back down at the sand. He picked up a second plastic shovel, a red one that had apparently been lying nearby, and he set it down in the sand beside him, not extended toward Noah, not offered with expectation, simply placed, available. Margaret pressed her fingers to her lips. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had sat across from venture capitalists who had tried to dismantle her credibility piece by piece and had not flinched. She had received a diagnosis about her son in a pale yellow office and driven home through evening traffic without once allowing her composure to fracture. But something about the simple, undemanding placement of that red shovel undid something in her. It took 4 minutes. She counted. After 4 minutes, Noah walked to the edge of the sandbox. He stood there for another moment, looking at the man and his son and their road of sand. Then he stepped in. He sat down beside the red shovel. He picked it up. He began to dig. The man's son looked at Noah. Noah looked at the man's son. Some wordless negotiation passed between them, the way it does between small children who have not yet learned to complicate things. And then the boy with the truck moved his vehicle along the new road that was being built, and Noah began reinforcing the walls, and the man sat between them, and the 3 of them worked together in the late September sunlight as though they had always done exactly this. Margaret could not move. After a while, she did not know how long, the man looked up and found her eyes. She was not embarrassed to be seen. She held his gaze, and she found that his eyes were kind in the straightforward way that certain people's eyes are kind, not performing warmth, but simply having it, the way some places are simply warm when you walk into them without knowing why. He stood, brushing sand from his jacket with the unhurried patience of a man who had long since made peace with the fact that good things leave marks on you, and he walked to the bench. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Please," she said. His name was Daniel Hartley. He told her this the way men of a certain straightforward nature introduced themselves, simply, without preamble. He worked in architectural restoration, he said, which was the work of understanding old things and figuring out how to let them continue. He had a laugh that came easily and did not overstay its welcome. His son's name was Eli. Eli, he explained, had had a difficult time since his mother passed 2 years ago. Not in a clinical sense, he was quick to say, not reaching for labels, just in the human sense, the ordinary, profound sense of a child who had lost someone central to his world and was finding his way back toward trust. "He doesn't say much to people he doesn't know yet," Daniel said. He said it without apology or sorrow, just as a simple fact about his son, the way you might mention that someone preferred the window seat. Margaret looked at Noah, who was still in the sandbox, still building his section of the road with quiet, serious attention. "Neither does mine," she said. There was a pause. "The good kind." "They seem to be doing all right together," Daniel said. "They do," she agreed. She told him a little, not everything, but some. The way you share things with a stranger on a bench in a park on a Saturday when the light is golden and the moment asks it of you. She told him that Noah had not spoken in 3 years, and that she had spent those 3 years doing everything the right way and following every recommendation and building every structure, and that sometimes she worried the structures were themselves a kind of wall. That, in trying so hard to help him, she had filled every silence before it had the chance to become something. Daniel listened the way he had watched his son in the sandbox, without interruption, without the urge to immediately fix or advise. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say," he began, and then he paused and smiled a little, the way people do when they are about to say something they half expect to sound too simple, "that the most important thing you can offer anyone is a little space right next to you. Not a solution, just your company and a spare shovel." She looked at him. She thought about her mother, who used to sit beside her on the porch swing on summer evenings, without saying anything at all, just being there, just present, and how those evenings had been the most restoring of her childhood. She had not thought about that in years. "That's very wise," she said. "He was a good man," Daniel said. "I'm still working on being half of what he was." They sat for a while longer. The boys played. Eli demonstrated something about the truck to Noah, a particular way of banking the wheels along the sand wall, and Noah watched and then tried it himself. And when it worked, he looked at Eli with an expression of pure and uncomplicated delight. When it was time to go, the light was shifting, the afternoon cooling into early evening, Noah came to Margaret and took her hand. She crouched down and looked at him, at his honey-colored eyes and his small, serious face. She did not ask him if he had fun. She had learned to resist the urge to narrate his experiences back to him. She simply held his hand. Daniel and Eli were gathering their things. Eli had kept the red shovel in his hand without appearing to notice he had done so, and Daniel, noticing this, looked at his son and then back at Margaret with a question in his eyes. "He can keep it," she said. Eli looked at the shovel and then at Noah. He held it up slightly, not offering it back, but acknowledging the transaction somehow, the way children acknowledge things between themselves. Noah looked at it, then he looked at Eli, and he nodded. A single, deliberate, meaningful nod. Eli nodded back. Margaret and Daniel exchanged a look over the heads of their sons, and in that look was something that did not need to be said. The particular warmth of two people who understand in the same moment that something real has just occurred. He asked if she might want to bring Noah back to the park the following Saturday. He and Eli came most weekends, he said. He mentioned it without pressure, simply placing it there the same way he had placed the shovel. "I think we'd like that," she said. On the drive home, Noah sat beside her in the back seat rather than looking out the window as he usually did. He held her hand the way he had in the park, firmly, with his particular brand of absolute trust. The city moved past them in the early evening light, golden and unhurried. She thought about Daniel's father and the spare shovel. She thought about her own mother on the porch swing. She thought about how so much of what mattered in a life was simply this, being present and patient and available, without demand. She thought about how she had spent 3 years building structures when perhaps what was needed was simply to sit down in the sand. When they got home, she made Noah his dinner, pasta with butter, his favorite, and afterward she sat beside him on the living room rug, while he arranged his small wooden animals into their familiar private order. She did not read to him yet. She did not turn on quiet music. She simply sat with him, cross-legged, in the warm light of the floor lamp, and she let the silence be what it was. Not absence, not something to be filled or corrected,